Okay, so good day everyone. I'm Dr. Bataclan again, and this time I will be discussing about diagnostics or laboratory workups as we commonly perceive or know. So today I will discuss what is diagnostics, what are the purpose and the factors that would be considered in choosing a particular diagnostics. Will focus is particularly on the validation, no, using clinical prediction rules using evidence-based medicine or EBM. So we'll be also looking into the computations of clinical prediction rules, looking at probabilities and likelihood ratios, and the limitations of using a clinical prediction rule. And lastly, I will discuss how to reduce errors in clinical decisions. So this is essentially a continuation of our previous lecture on clinical reasoning. So, World Health Organization defined diagnostics as medical devices, techniques, and procedures used for in vitro and in vivo determination of a physiological status or presence and characteristics of a disease. So, there could have multiple functions of diagnostics. Could be for prevention, for screening, again, diagnosis, for the management of the disease, and monitoring of various diseases. So diagnostics helps to empower the healthcare workforce in the identification of diseases and various health conditions. But remember, again, diagnostics is just a supplement of your history and physical examination. To be able to confirm the presence of diagnostics, no, based on your history in PE, would be a confidence boosting, no, especially for a clinician. You'll be more confident in handling cases, and you'll have a better clinical eye in looking for the presence or absence of particular manifestations that is usually typically present, no, in a particular disorder or disease. So again, the purposes would be to increase certainty about the presence or the absence of a particular disease. It also helps to determine how severe the disease is. It also helps for monitoring of the clinical course because there could be physiologic parameters that could change. No, when you give intervention, when you give management, there will be changes now in your diagnostic values. It also gives you an assessment on the prognosis of the patient, whether the risk or the stage within the diagnosis. And important also would be the planning of a treatment, especially if the purpose of the diagnostics is localization of the particular disorder. But sometimes diagnostics can also be used to stall for time, especially in very difficult cases, or those uncommon diseases. You have to be very careful also in giving certain diseases, uh, and label the patient as having a particular diagnosis, especially in much more devastating or psychologically difficult to handle diseases, like for example malignancies. So you have to use all the possible diagnostics available, so that you have to be you're certain, you're sure that that the patient really has the presence of that particular disease. So diagnostic tests essentially test your hypothesis based on your primary impression and differential diagnosis. There is no perfect diagnostic test, so definitely they have limitations as well. And it gives us probabilities, and these are not real probabilities. These are not real life situations. Okay, so there is a possibility, for example, no, if the a particular diagnostic, probably, for example, in a particular test, 10% of these patients doesn't have the doesn't have the disease, or the 10% of the results of that particular test is normal or negative, but that doesn't mean that the probability of that patient is also 10% of not having the disease. Again, you have to again go back to your history and physical examination and look into the clinical context of the patient. So most values and scoring system are continuous variables, meaning they are numerical in value. They are not dichotomous na positive or negative. So, and this range can change from time to time, no? Depending on the consensus of clinical experts and other studies that are continuously being made and developed. So it's better to say, in example, in serum chemistries, it's better to use a reference range rather than a normal range. So sometimes the ranges could be arbitrary. And the most difficult part is there are some laboratories that doesn't revise, no, their reference ranges in the when they report or print their laboratory results. So sometimes it's very difficult. It creates confusion within the patients. And as you as a doctor, you know what would be the current reference range for a particular laboratory or diagnostic. And it's for you to interpret properly the result, and also not just interpret the result, but also incorporate it into the clinical context of the patient. Probabilities of the disease depends on the probability before the test was done. So again, history and physical examination is very important. Your high clinical suspicion based on that two elements is always important. More than the result that you will get in the diagnostics. And then you have to use probabilities here. So you have a pretest probability, and the pretest probability is you can, as a reference point, would be what is the prevalence of the disease. So for example, chronic kidney disease in the Philippines, the prevalence would be around 20% of Filipinos. So that means 1 out of 5 Filipinos have chronic kidney disease. So your pretest probability would be 20%. Okay, if you're trying to diagnose chronic kidney disease in a particular individual. Again, young clinicians do not realize that history and PE can change the pretest probability before a test is done. So that's why it's very important that you have the complete clinical information, no, based on a good history taking and complete basic physical examination. Because absence, no, again I would mention, no, not performing a particular PE maneuver, for example, does not equate to a negative test or normal PE finding. In the same way, not mentioning it in the history, it doesn't mean it's not present or it's normal for that particular individual. You should be able to document all these things, whether it's positive or present or not present. And then there are also other things to consider. Okay. While it's important that the test is valid or there's a good validation, which we will discuss later on, there are other things that you have to consider when requesting for diagnostics. First and foremost would be the accessibility and the availability. Even if that test 100% can diagnose a particular disease, if that test is only available in Metro Manila, would you request it for a patient for a patient here in Nueva Ecija? So and you have to also consider the cost. Okay, it's 100%, it has a 100% accuracy in diagnosing a particular disease, but it costs 10,000 pesos. So would you request that in a patient that only works as a street vendor? So you have to consider also the cost and the practicality of those tests. And then the risk. No? There are some tests that are invasive in nature. Okay, like for example, colonoscopy, endoscopy, biopsies, because they would entail some certain harm, possible harm on an individual. So you also have to consider risk. For example, in our case, we get referrals in patients that needs contrast in certain imaging tests, whether CT scan or magnetic resonance imaging. So if the creatinine is slightly elevated or it's really uh, abnormal for a long time, so we have to do risk assessment if giving contrast to that particular patient would be beneficial or more harmful, and it may provoke nephrotoxicity and further renal failure on that individual. And finally, important is patient's preference. Even if all things considered are positive, okay, if the patient refuse testing, as long as you have explained the rationale, the cost, the risk, if there's any, and if the patient still refuses that particular test, we have to respect that. As long as you give the right information, so informed consent is a very important aspect also in the things to consider when requesting for diagnostics. Again, going back here, no? So the type 1, what we have discussed previously, the type 1 thinking, the use of heuristics, the intuitive type, a rapid type of clinical decision making, or using clinical prediction rules. So there are scoring systems in addition to diagnostics, and there are other diagnostic models that have been used in which uh, studies would say it outperform basic intuition or use of heuristics in diagnosing a particular disease. And with the exponential growth, no, because like I mentioned, these diagnostics undergoes further validation and application in different areas, because remember, the positivity sometimes of a diagnostic can also change, no, from one locality to another, because of other factors as well. And with the growth of this evidence in clinical research trials, there will be it will have a larger weight, no, of evidence, no, than any intuition or clinical expertise for a particular physician. So, for example, no, in patients having chest pain, okay, so initially the only one that's available would be the electrocardiogram, looking if there's ST elevation or not, or even signs of ischemia. But as we all know, even if the patient doesn't have any ST elevation or ST segment elevation or any signs of ischemia, there's still the possibility that the patient may have myocardial infarction. Okay, so eventually there is a biomarker that's developed called troponin. So and then even if you combine ECG and troponin, there's still a possibility that you're still missing a particular percentage of patients that still have myocardial infarction. So there are additional clinical models or scoring, such as this STEMI scoring system, that would also help you increase your ability to detect a particular disease given a particular case that the patient might experience. So that's the very essence, no, of these diagnostics. So again, as I mentioned, these probabilities are not in real time, but you're just looking into a probability of the disease, and you can estimate it or you can determine it using two approaches. So the first one would be the Bayes theorem in order to determine the post-test probability, and the use of likelihood ratios. So essentially, you have to first validate a diagnostic test. So it's very important. Okay. So very simple, no? So in most of the time, it's either you have a positive test or a negative or normal test. And then in patients that have the disease and the patients which doesn't have the disease. So as I mentioned, there will in a diagnostics, you want that the patient with the disease to have a positive result in that particular test. But in reality, there would be a percentage of patients that will have a positive test results but doesn't really have the disease. Conversely, if the test is negative, you want to be sure that that these individuals with negative results doesn't really have the disease. But there is a percentage of these patients that even with the negative test results, eventually the patient or this group of patients might still have the disease. So from this, you can now compute these parameters, these validation parameters, the sensitivity, specificity, positive, negative predictive value, and then the prevalence and the likelihood ratios. So yung sensitivity is yung the number of true positive individuals among those with the disease. Okay? How many percentage of those patients with the disease had a positive test result? So that's why it's true positive over the disease present. Okay? And then yung specificity is the percentage or the proportion of those who have negative test results among those individuals without the disease. So it's true negative over true negative plus false positive. Positive predictive value now is what is the proportion now of patients with positive results that the patient has the disease. So it's true positive plus true positive plus false positive. And then your negative predictive value is what is the proportion of those with negative results really have doesn't really have the disease. So it's true negative divided by true negative plus false negative. And then prevalence is yung the disease present over the whole population. Okay? And then the likelihood ratios, we will discuss it in detail in the next slides. So, but first we'll go to the clinical scenario. So, let's say we have a 38-year-old female that consulted due to epigastric pain of 2 weeks duration. The pain is described as bloatedness occurring 30 minutes to 1 hour after eating. It's precipitated with fatty or oily food, and it also occurs in non-oily and non-fatty food. It is also discrete and non-radiating in nature. The patient has no history of T-colored urine, jaundice, or fever. And the physical examination was unremarkable for this case. So your impression is the patient may have cholelithiasis or a gallbladder stone. And you have differentials of a peptic ulcer disease with gastroparesis and possible gastric outlet obstruction. So based on the literature, for example, you have it was shown that the prevalence of gallbladder stone in women between 35 to 50 years old complaining of postprandial pain is 60%. Remember the fat, fertile 40 feature, a classical feature of cholelithiasis or gallbladder stone. So that prevalence now would be your pretest probability. No? Based on your history and PE, this patient is a 38-year-old with a postprandial pain. So most likely 60% the patient might have cholelithiasis. And then the diagnostic that you want to use for this patient would be ultrasound, sonography, because sonography can visualize the presence or absence of gallstones using the machine. So you have made a literature search and found that it has a 95% sensitivity and 90% specificity. So it's not computed. But in the exercise I will give you, you will you have to compute first the sensitivity and specificity of a particular test. So now you have to create now the diagnostic issue for gallbladder stone, because you have to determine, based now on your diagnostic test, would you start treatment or would you do further testing? No, if particularly if the patient doesn't have the presence, no, of gallstone in this case, no, using sonogram. So as we mentioned, the pretest is 60%. So that's the prevalence of the disease. Now, you have to now the treatment and the testing thresholds now, they usually differ from one clinician to another, but you have to heavily consider here the nature of the disease and the nature of the treatment and further testing that is given, no, on a particular disease. So for gallbladder stone, the standard of treatment would be surgery, cholecystectomy, surgical removal of the gallbladder. So you want to have a higher treatment threshold so that you're sure that the patient really has the disease based on the diagnostics, and therefore you're more confident in referring the patient to a surgeon. And when the surgeon opens up the abdomen and removes the gallbladder, there will be presence of those gallstones. So in this case, you really need to have a high uh, threshold for treatment. So in this case, it's 90%. So you're just leaving a 10% uncertainty that the patient doesn't really have the disease despite a positive diagnostic result. And then in testing threshold should be um, on the other spectrum, because now you're now depending on if now that the result is negative, okay, do you need further testing, or would you start treatment or begin management when in this particular patient? So in this case, no, so the testing threshold is 10%, meaning in case that the result is negative, okay, anything less than 10%, you don't have to do further testing. You can start treatment considering you have to consider other disease entity, or you don't need any further testing and start managing the patient appropriately. Okay, so essentially you have to compute the probabilities here, and this mathematical model called the Bayes theorem, it has become the basis, no, of detecting the conditional probability of two events. So it's either you're looking for, in this case, the probability of the person having the disease given a positive result, and vice versa, the probability of the person not having the disease given a negative result. So you have to determine the true positive and the true negative. But you also have to determine the false negative and the false positive here. So these are, so again, given a population, there would be individuals with the disease and without the disease. So those with the disease, the proportion of the patients with the disease in a population is prevalence. Now, in those patients with the disease, the diagnostic test can either comes out as positive or negative. So if the test is positive, that proportion now would be the sensitivity. For those without the disease, and presumably you also do that diagnostic, okay? So there would be individuals that will still have a positive result despite having the initial features that doesn't suggest the presence of the disease, and a negative result among those without the disease clinically. So the proportion now of those without the disease the proportion of the patients with negative test result among those patients without the disease is the specificity of a particular test. So now based on that formula, so yung true positive would be the sensitivity times the prevalence. The false negative would be the 1 minus sensitivity times the prevalence. Ito yon. So this is a false negative. False positive, meaning positive siya but doesn't have the disease. 1 minus specificity times 1 minus prevalence. And the true negative is specificity times 1 minus prevalence. And then, knowing the pre-test probability, now you have to determine now the post-test. By computing all of these values, now you can determine the post-test probability of the disease. So, if it is positive, so it's the quotient of true positive and the sum of true positive plus false positive. So, essentially, this is the positive predictive value. And then you also have to check the post-test probability of not having the disease if the test is negative. So it's 1 minus the quotient of true negative over true negative plus false negative. So this is essentially the negative predictive value. So now let's go to the computation. Again, the prevalence of disease is 60%. That's a pretest probability. And ultrasound has a sensitivity of 95%, specificity of 90%. So let's determine first the post-test probability if the test is positive. So again, it's true positive divided by true positive plus false positive. So ito yon. So sensitivity times prevalence, and then yung sensitivity times prevalence plus the product of 1 minus specificity and 1 minus prevalence. So yeah, 0.1 and 0.4. Kasi 1 minus 0.9, kaya 0.1. 1 minus 0.6, it's 0.4. Okay? So 0.95 times 0.6, 0.57, and then 0.57 plus 0.04. So the answer is 93.4%. So that's the probability that the patient has the disease, no? If the result of the ultrasound is positive. What about if the patient has a negative test? What's the post-test probability? So now it's 1 minus the true negative over true negative plus false negative. So again, specificity times 1 minus prevalence. So yan, 0.9 yung specificity. 0.4 kasi 1 minus 0.6. And then specificity times 1 minus prevalence, so the same. And then 1 minus sensitivity kasi 1 minus 0.95 is 0.05. And then yung prevalence is 0.6. So 0.36. Okay, divided by 0.37. But yung quotient na to, you have to subtract it to 1. So 1 minus 0.923 would be 0.077, and you convert it into percentage, you multiply it by 100, so it's 7.7%. So ito na yun yung positive predictive value mo, 93.4%, and you have a 7.7% negative predictive value. So before that, okay, before applying to this scenario, there's another way to compute yung probabilities. And that is using the likelihood ratio. So essentially, you're converting the probability to odds here, in which you multiply the odds with a positive likelihood ratio if the test is positive, and you multiply also the odds with the negative likelihood ratio if the test is negative. It's very important here, no, to consider also yung rule what would be your basis also in using the diagnostics, no? So when I ask yung mga residents, Okay. What would be your basis, for example, of a in the validation parameters? What is your basis of confirming a test? Okay. So they answered if the one with the high sensitivity. Okay. Actually, it's not the correct basis. So pardon for the wait. I'll just correct that so that it avoids confusion. Okay, sorry. So remember yung mnemonic, snout and spin. Okay? So when you're trying to rule out a test out, okay, you should consider sensitivity. When you're considering ruling in or confirming a test, you should consider specificity. Okay? So why? So if you would compute now the likelihood ratios here, if there is a negative likelihood ratio, okay, if there it should be low, meaning it's below the testing threshold, your sensitivity is high, meaning because since it's lower than the testing threshold, you don't need to do further testing. You're confident that that particular disease is not present for that patient, and therefore you don't need to do further testing in order to rule out that particular disease. Conversely, if you want to confirm a particular test, you want to have a high specificity. Why? Because when you compute the likelihood ratio or the probability here with a high specificity, the probability now is goes beyond or greater than the treatment threshold. So therefore, if you go beyond the treatment threshold, you're confident that that patient has the disease, the diagnostic had confirmed the presence of that disorder, and therefore you can already start your management. You're more sure in giving the treatment because giving the proper treatment is a very crucial part no of clinical decision making. So you need to have a high specificity. So for a confirmatory test, you want a diagnostic tool with high specificity. But if you want a good screening test, meaning you want to rule out the presence of the disease, for example, you want to screen individuals with diabetics, okay? So you want to have a diagnostic test wherein the sensitivity now is high in order to rule out diabetes as a screening for a particular group of people or a population. So let's take this case for example, no? So test one, sensitivity is 90% and then the specificity is 80%. And then the negative likelihood ratio is 0.125 and then the positive likelihood ratio is 4.5. Compared to the another test which has a lower sensitivity and a higher specificity. Okay? So for example, okay. So as you can see here, the sensitivity here is higher than this one, which leads to a negative likelihood ratio. So this would translate into a lower value in terms of testing threshold. So I so therefore you don't need further testing if test 1 comes up with a negative result or a normal value. Conversely, as you can see here, the positive likelihood ratio in test 2 is higher than in the test 1, having a higher specificity. So therefore, if you would look into the treatment threshold, so it goes beyond the treatment threshold, you're more certain that the disease is present given that the diagnostic test comes out positive, and you're giving the adequate and proper treatment for this particular individual. So if you want to confirm a disease, I would choose test 2 because of the higher specificity. So it depends on what is your objective or purpose of that particular diagnostic test. So now, applying now to our case, going back. Now again, a prevalence of 60%, sensitivity 95%, specificity 90%. So the pretest odds here would just be prevalence over 1 minus prevalence. So 0.6 divided by 0.4, again 60% against dun sa wala, which is 40%. So it's 1.5:1. Those are the odds. Okay. Now the positive likelihood ratio is the quotient of sensitivity over 1 minus specificity. So 0.95 dahil 95%, and then 1 minus 0.9, so 0.1. So the positive likelihood ratio here is 9.5. The post-test odds would be positive likelihood ratio times the pre-test odds. Ito, 1.5. So 9.5 times 1.5, it's 14.25:1. That is now your post-test odds. Now you can convert it back to a probability. So you just add a factor of 1, okay, dun sa denominator. So 14.25 divided by 14.25 plus 1, you get these values, and it's translated into 0.934 and multiply by 100 to convert it into percentage, 93.4%, which is similar to this one, the post-test probability when test is positive. And then you have to compute the negative likelihood ratio, which is 1 minus sensitivity, so 1 minus 0.95, which is 0.05, and then the specificity, which is 90% or 0.9. So ito yung sagot, 0.0556. And then to get the post-test odds, you multiply the negative likelihood ratio with the pre-test odds, 1.5. So yeah, so 0.0556 times 1.5 is 0.0833:1. And convert the odds into probability. So 0.0833 over 0.0833 plus 1, it is 0.077. Multiply by 100, it's 7.7%. So it's similar to this one, using the Bayes theorem formulation. So it's up to you what would be the much more easier way of computing. But in the activity, you will compute it using the likelihood ratio and the Bayes theorem. So now you have these probabilities already present. You have the 93.4% probability if the disease is there, if the test is positive, and a 7.7% likelihood of negative absence of the disease given the negative, if the diagnostic has a negative result. So now, would you refer the patient to have a cholecystectomy? So now, yeah. Again, the post-test, so kunwari, the patient has, based on the ultrasound, the patient has cholelithiasis or gallstones. And now your post-test probability of positive is 93.4%. So it goes beyond now your treatment threshold. So if it goes beyond, meaning greater than the treatment threshold, you can refer now the patient to the surgeon to do cholecystectomy, because you have a greater certainty that the patient most likely have cholelithiasis. Okay? And in addition to that, you want not just to remove or to resolve the postprandial pain of that individual. You have to do cholecystectomy because you want to prevent complications that could be related to gallstones. So there could be acute cholecystitis, or worse, the stone can migrate to the common bile duct or the smaller hepatic ducts, that would lead to choledocholylitis, and worse, this could lead to a much more dangerous complication known as ascending cholangitis. So, while the patient doesn't have those complications, it is advised that this patient have cholecystectomy. Laparoscopic or open is still an option, an open surgery, an open cholecystectomy. Now, if the ultrasound is negative now, would you stop testing and treat the patient as peptic ulcer disease, given that it's one of your differentials for this case? So now let's look at the negative likelihood ratio. So it's 7.7%. So it is less than now your testing threshold. And as I mentioned again, if the negative likelihood probability is less than the testing threshold, you don't have to do further testing. You consider your alternative differential and start managing it. So given this, I would treat the patient as having peptic ulcer disease. And you give omeprazole, 40 milligrams once a day in the morning. And then you give a prokinetic, a mosapride, 5 milligrams 3 times a day for 2 weeks. Okay. Sorry for that delay. Let's go back to... Okay. So, again, as I mentioned, no, if the negative probability is less than the testing threshold, consider the alternative diagnosis and do the appropriate management. Okay. But for example, no, okay, this patient after so for example, the ultrasound was negative. You consider the patient having a peptic ulcer disease. But after 2 weeks of giving omeprazole and the mosapride, the symptoms persist and the patient was admitted due to black tarry stool. So the patient already have melena. So now what to do? Now do you now do other diagnostics? CT scan, MRI, or doing a esophagogastroduodenoscopy or the endoscopy. So now one of your considerations now would be a possibility of gastric cancer, because your primary impression sometimes differs now after monitoring, after initial treatment. So since um, there's a negative test, so you're now ruled out cholelithiasis. So that doesn't mean you have to again reconsider cholelithiasis here. Remember, based on your thresholds, you're confident that the patient doesn't have cholelithiasis and it's time to consider other differentials. So in this case, you consider gastric CA because of the presence of melena. So in the literature, the prevalence of gastric carcinoma in women 35 to 50 years old with postprandial pain and melena is 3%. So now that is your pretest probability in this scenario now. And then you want to do endoscopy, in which so that the purpose here is you can visualize the presence of ulcer that could be and the presence of a possible mass in the stomach. And in your literature search, it has a 90% sensitivity and 100% specificity. Also, another important utility of endoscopy would be if you visualize a mass or a pathologic lesion in the upper gastrointestinal tract, you can get a sample, a tissue sample, and submit it for biopsy. So let's say you consider EGD now as your potential diagnostic tool in this case, 2 weeks after the poor response to the initial medication. So gastric CA is a much more devastating disease. It's malignancy. I don't think anyone would be glad or happy to have malignancy as having as the disease. So now your thresholds now changes. Okay? So, if positive, again, the mainstay treatment would be the surgical removal of the stomach. Okay? And there could also be a resection also of the adjacent areas depending on the extent of the disease. Okay? And the pathologic stage of the malignancy. So you now have to be more sure than ever when you diagnose these patients as having gastric CA. So now your treatment threshold now goes higher, 98%. Okay? So it's it's much higher now than having cholelithiasis because of the gravity, the grave nature of the disease, and translated a more potentially dangerous type of management that you will give. No? It's not just a simple removal of the gallbladder. We can survive without a gallbladder, but it would entail changes, no, in the lifestyle and the daily activities if the stomach is removed. So you have to have a higher treatment threshold here. So 98%. Conversely, if it's negative, it also gives you a higher confidence that it's less likely a malignancy. So in the cholelithiasis, it's 10%. But here, you can set it at much lower, 0.5%, meaning you're 99 point, if the test is negative, you're 99.5% sure that it's not gastric CA. You don't need to do further testing and consider other differentials and give treatment, the appropriate treatment for your particular clinical impression. Again, the pretest is 3% because that's the prevalence of gastric CA in that particular demographic of our patient. So now, applying the Bayes theorem, prevalence 3%, sensitivity 90%, specificity 100%. So the post-test probability when the test is positive, again, yung the positive predictive value, yan, 100%. Okay? So sensitivity times the prevalence over sensitivity, the sum of sensitivity times prevalence, and yung 1 minus specificity, kaya 0. And then yung 1 minus the prevalence. So 1 minus 0.03. But since 0 times 0.97, 0. So it's virtually 0. So 100%. Now, if the post-test probability when test is negative, so it's 1 minus, so yung 1 time, ito yun, specificity times 1 minus the prevalence times yung, again, yung sensitivity times 1 minus prevalence and yung 1 minus sensitivity times 1 minus prevalence. Ay, 1, ano pala, no, the prevalence pala, sorry. Again. 1 minus, so yung specificity times 1 minus the prevalence divided by the specificity times 1 minus prevalence plus the product of 1 minus sensitivity and the prevalence. So yeah, so you divide first using the MDAS rule, so 0.97 over 0.97 plus 0.003, and you get the 0.0997, subtract it from 1, so it's 0.003 times 100, it's 0.3%. So that's the probability when the test is negative. Now, using likelihood ratios, again, using the formula, in pretest odds, so prevalence over 1 minus prevalence, so it's 1:32.3. So baliktad naman, no? So the odds is much lower now as compared to our earlier example. So the positive likelihood ratio is 0.9 times, actually ano to, 1 minus 1. So it's 0. So 0.9 over 0, it's an infinite number. Diba? So ganun sa math eh. If the denominator is 0, your answer is an infinite number. So looking at the post-test odds, any number you multiply sa infinity would be infinity over 32.3. Okay? And then looking at the post-test probability, the 32.3 here is negligible in an infinite number. So infinite over infinite is 100%. So again, same dun sa post-test probability positive using the Bayes theorem. Sa negative, ganun din. You compute for the negative likelihood ratio. So 1 minus sensitivity over the specificity. So 0.1. Post-test odds. So yun, 0.1. 1 over the pre-test odds, which is 0.1 is to 32.3. And then post-test probability, 0.1 over 32.4. Again, 0.3%. So this is similar as this one. So it's up to you what method you will use. But again, dun sa exercise na gagawin natin, you have to show me the computation of both approaches. So now using this. So for example, in the endoscopy, it was positive. There are features in your endoscopy, and then you have a biopsy performed, and it was gastric CA. So given that the post-test is 100%, now you're confident that the patient has gastric CA, and you have to refer this patient for surgery, for gastrectomy, okay, with resection to other adjacent gastrointestinal uh, areas as well. So because it's greater than the treatment threshold. But if the endoscopy was negative, the likelihood is 0.3%. So it is much lower than the testing threshold, meaning even with a lower threshold, no, it's 0.5%, with a 0.5% threshold, the negative likelihood was even lower at 0.3%. So in essence, you're 99.7 sure that the patient doesn't have gastric CA. So now what you will do? Would you do further testing? Would you repeat endoscopy? Do other procedures? Or you'll just observe or consider other differentials? So the correct answer is now you don't need further testing because the negative likelihood odds is lower. You have to consider now, for example, a functional gastrointestinal disorder, probably an irritable bowel syndrome, and you have to observe or maybe give other treatment for that patient. So this is how you do an evidence-based evaluation, no, of diagnostics in relation to your clinical decision. That would and how your diagnostics can affect your management in a particular patient, given if the test would come out as positive or negative. However, no, so remember again, there's no such thing as a perfect diagnostic test. Even if, for example, a good post-test probability of 100%, eventually there could sometimes atypical presentations that diagnostics cannot be seen or cannot be appreciated upon. So as you can see here, no, so there are other tests, no, they've made a systematic review here comparing, no, use of clinical prediction rules with diagnostics compared to just history and PE alone. So using no, various diseases such as acute appendicitis, myocardial infarction, pneumonia, head trauma, cervical spine injuries, pulmonary tuberculosis, which is very common in our country, in even flu. So as you can see here, no, there is no difference now, no, in terms of yung clinical prediction rules, when you compare it with using yung clinical judgment. So there is no significant difference, and there are certain instances that yung clinical judgment is better, no? In determining the presence of head injury, like here, yung head injury over using clinical prediction rules. So yung evidence-based medicine computation. So the study showed that the clinical prediction rules is rarely superior to clinical judgment. So there is a trade-off, no, of proportions of individuals without the disease against the proportion of misdiagnosis. So that's what I mentioned before, or just prior to that slide. You can still miss the diagnosis of the patient despite having either a positive, especially negative pala, sorry, absence of the result, no, in the diagnostics. And then even in a positive diagnostic result, the patients can still eventually doesn't show any pathologic manifestations of the disease. So the preferred method now will depend on the relative benefit and harm of identifying the true and false positive diagnostics. So again, risk assessment, no, of, because there are some procedures that would be invasive in nature, no, such as the endoscopy. Yung ultrasound, not much. There's not much risk or harm in doing ultrasonography. It doesn't have radiation. It won't cause a relative discomfort or harm to the patient. It's not penetrative in nature. So the diagnostics now will depend on the pros and cons, no, using the other factors that we have described in the first few slides in this lecture. So therein lies the problem with diagnostic evidence-based medicine. So sometimes the results of these studies are not easily translated to individual patients and preferences. So that's still very important. What does that patient prefer in terms of testing? So it's very important to have a proper communication, tell the pros and cons of a particular diagnostics, and come about with a compromise, no, in agreement on how to go about the approach, no, in discovering what could be the patient's disease. And clinical trials deal with a rigidly defined patient population. So again, usually these have the classical manifestations of the disease. So it doesn't account into the atypical manifestations of a particular disease, which can be present, no, in a significant proportion in certain cases. The problem with studies is that most of the published trials would be the one would have a positive results. No? The one with the negative results are usually not published. So that again, the publication bias can come into picture, and those biases will be discussed when you further have a lecture on research. And then the data from randomized controlled trials should represent the beginning of the decision process. So like what we determine the probabilities at the start of the diagnostics, not at the not when the diagnostic was already performed. So you should keep that in mind. So you weigh the choice of that diagnostic prior to doing it, not after doing it. Okay? Because that would be that is not the point of the data that you can derive from the validation studies and randomized controlled trials. So clinical judgment is still very important, especially in most cases and in resource-limited settings. Good performance is dependent on the experiential knowledge of the physician, and it comes from experience. And unfortunately, that experience can also come from bad judgment. So sometimes we learn lessons in patients that would have, let's say, morbid, no, or even worse, patients that unfortunately passed away or suddenly went into cardiac arrest. So you have to take the good and bad. And I'm not romanticizing medicine by that. Medicine, for a part, like I mentioned, it's a combination of the logical and still the experiential aspect of learning. And there'll always be always something bad that will happen in medicine because we're handling the lives of people. Okay, even with good intentions, even with the best care possible, the worst outcomes can still happen. So, but the most important thing is we have to reduce errors in our clinical decision making. So, what are some of these steps? First one is you rule out worst case scenario. So, for example, in epigastric pain, it's very important to rule out myocardial infarction because that is a one it's a devastating disease that could be fatal to any individual. So, if you can rule out using history and physical examination and you have the confidence to rule out, that would be good. Do you need further testing? As long as you have the again the availability of the resources uh and the patient allows you to perform those tests and with proper explanation, that would be that would clear up the possibility of a very catastrophic disease, the worst case scenario differentials in a particular symptom. Effective team communication is important, especially in this day and age where it's a multidisciplinary, multi-specialty management. So you have to communicate with all the physicians, even with the allied health professionals in your diagnostics and the way you manage the patients, more importantly. Again, very important, the construction of the problem list and the differential diagnosis. So making a good problem list and then formulating your SOAP based on those problems would be crucial, no? More than order, and it's not just requesting for the diagnostics. Okay, so looking into the totality of the patient, no? When the patient comes to you and complains of a particular ailment. So it's still a mix, no, of the clinical judgment and clinical prediction rules that would still be prevalent. Now, for now, no, you have to be more systematic when you analyze cases. So it's more of the clinical prediction rules, but with further clinical exposure and experience, uh, the clinical judgment, the intuitive type of thinking will be developed, and hopefully you would have a good critical thinking skill, no? In looking into the various possible diseases that the patient may have so that you'll be guided by a good diagnostic plan and eventually a sound management for these patients with the hope of a positive outcome. So with that, thank you for listening, and we will see on our next meeting to discuss the activity. Thank you very much.